listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It's Friday, the 23rd of June, 2023, and episode 22 of The Observing Eye. If you're new, welcome aboard. If you're returning, welcome back. As always, I like to begin our episodes with a brief moment of reflection. So let's take just a few moments to consider and contemplate the good things that have happened this week. And now a few moments for those not so good things. This week's episode is all about time. Not from a physical, relativistic sense. We aren't going to be looking at anything around Einstein, and we aren't going to be diving into, contrarily, the works of Heidegger on being and time and getting all German and philosophical about it. This one's actually going to be nice and straightforward because I want to talk about time in the modern world, time in life, and some ways to think about time and manage time a little bit better. Now, I feel like many of us, and I would count myself in this category historically, have a very laissez-faire approach to time. We go out into the world and we act as though there is an infinite amount of it, as though our time is a limitless resource, and it sadly is not. The thing that changed my mind around time was when I was reading some work around the Stoics. I started on Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and there's a very important idea within Stoicism called memento mori, which essentially means remember that you're going to die. And it sounds a little maudlin, but I think it's important to remember that our time is finite, that we have a limited amount, and we should spend it wisely. So that's the point of this episode today, spending time wisely and managing it better. The time is really fascinating from a cognitive sense because it's exceptionally fluid, and I know all of you listening have experienced this. We can be waiting for something to happen, you know, the whole like clock watching idea, and time will move at a snail's pace. But when we're engrossed in something interesting, it just vanishes in an instant. Hours become seconds, essentially. So not only do we have a finite amount of time, but when we're doing things that are fun, it just goes faster than when we're doing things that are dull and boring, like a big middle finger from the universe to us. Thanks, universe. Appreciate that little one there. So how do we manage the limited time that we have then? Well, I think the first thing we have to do is recognize the things that are worth spending our time on. When we consider that time has a limit in terms of the quantity that we have, I feel that this allows us to focus our perspective on doing things that are valuable and important and are going to give us more. So I'm going to use a very prescient example. Crashing through the next level on Candy Crush, although it's fun, obviously, has two drawbacks. One, our perception of time is going to be faster because we're doing something we enjoy. And two, there is no real potential outcome for us that's going to be of benefit. Except, of course, for the fact that we're having fun, which is, yes, very important. And time needs to be made for fun. That's something I'll talk about, hopefully, a bit later if I remember. I want to draw on another philosopher for a moment. I'm pulling them in today, but, I do anyway, so it's fine. So there's a German philosopher called Nietzsche, and he talks about the Übermensch, or the supermind. And he speaks of how us as human beings are likened to sculptures that are never finished. And we need to be really, not should, we need to be thinking with our limited amount of time on how we can better improve that sculpture, recognizing that it will never be finished, but spending time to make it better. So as much as I love playing video games, I think, as I said, I've got to inject some fun into life. It's part of the human experience. But I also have to ensure that I'm spending a certain amount of time each week working on myself. It ends up being time each day at the moment. There's a lot to fix, as I'm sure all of us could admit if we really are honest with ourselves. Or maybe not to fix, to make better. A car engine may run and it will get you from A to B and everything will be fine. It does its job, but we could make it more efficient. We could make it better. We could make it faster and more economical and all of those things to do with cars that I know very little about. That being said then, how do we manage this limited amount of time in a way that is productive and enables us to enjoy things and engage with stuff that's fun and make sure that we are having a good human experience, but also getting everything else done in the most efficient and organized way possible? So how do we make the best use of the time that we have? I personally really like this idea of time boxing, and I use it constantly now. It's something I had heard of. I'm sure you've heard of it as well a while back, and it seemed like an interesting idea, but I never really acted on it. But what I've done now is I have my Google Calendar, and my Google Calendar has very specific blocks of time for everything that I need to do for that week. So Sunday night, I plan the week, I box everything in. And then that week, I have specific time slots for everything I need to do. And that will be from stuff for work. That'll be stuff for myself, like exercise, meditating, what have you. That'll be downtime. Everything that I want to do that week is in the calendar in a time box. So this podcast, for example, that's time boxed in the calendar. I give myself 90 minutes to get this done. And with all the editing and stuff, I sometimes leave very long pauses between sections and try and trim it down to make it a better experience for you, the wonderful listener. The time boxing I found has been a really great way of managing it, because when I know I've got stuff to do and it's just like kind of an ethereal mix of things that are there and need to happen in the future, I feel like, and this is just my experience, I feel like my focus drifts. But when I say to myself, right, you've got 90 minutes to do this podcast, that's it, there becomes like a sense of urgency around it. And I find it makes me focus so much better. I mean, I'll probably get it done in less than 90 minutes because these aren't particularly long and I hopefully won't have to do too much editing. But what it enables me to do is to be very singular about what I'm working on. And it reminds me as well. So like things like, oh, make sure you do like half an hour on the cross trainer thing today. Great. If I don't put that in the calendar, it's very easy for me to get sidetracked, because I'm one of those people that will get sidetracked if something interesting comes up, like, oh, piece of candy, shiny things. So for me, it's great. It works really well because I go, right, okay, it's 12:30, exercise, lunch, let's go. Well, not at the same time. I'm not going to eat like a cheese and pickle sandwich on the rowing machine. That's awkward and messy. But you know what I mean? So everything is boxed in. And I would treat that as kind of locked for the week. So if on the very odd occasion, I get a friend phone me up and they're like, what are you doing? If they're phoning me up and it's in that week where time boxing has been done, unfortunately, I have to push it back because we have to treat the calendar as sacrosanct. I think you can all agree with me on this. I'm sure you've had the same experience. if we aren't committed and we aren't consistent with things, then it becomes very easy for us to just fuck it off, basically. So with the whole time boxing stuff, if I don't treat the calendar as like a biblical sacrosanct thing, then I'm giving myself permission to go, well, I've time boxed this for an hour, but I can't be bothered, so I'm going to go and do this other thing instead. That's not, time boxing doesn't work with that sort of mindset. So we really have to make sure that we follow it and we don't give ourselves permission to just jump off. Unless, like, obviously something urgent happens. That's, there are extenuating circumstances when we can deviate from the time box. That is fine. But as a rule of thumb, if it's in the calendar, if it's in the time box, then it happens. That's it. There is no deviation from that. And I've found I'm getting a lot more done in less time, which means more time on Candy Crush, right? I've got to get past level 150, I think. I'm not great at it. And I feel like the sort of sense of urgency you get by having things in a very distinct or discrete packet of time, it reinforces that idea that time is limited. And I'm going on about it again. I don't want to depress you. I know the weekend's coming. But I really feel it's important that we remind ourselves at least once a day that there is a finite amount of time. Because by remembering that time is finite, from our cognitive sense, not from a great universal, time could be infinite. It could be a big loop. We could be doing this over and over again ad infinitum. But from our little human perspectives, there's a limited amount. So remind yourself of that. I talked about affirmations in the last podcast, and maybe my affirmation would be, remember, I don't like saying remember you're going to die, because that sounds a bit grim. Remember you're going to die. It's just like this little voice whispering at you in the first thing when you wake up in the morning. Remember death. It's not how I want to start the day, really. But what I do want to remind myself is that my time is the most valuable thing that I have. And it's the one commodity, and I'm going to use the word commodity because it feels like it is, the one commodity that I have that I can never get back once I've spent it. So that makes me think about what I'm doing, what I'm spending time on, who I'm spending time with, and not wasting it frivolously on stuff that has no meaning to me, no value, doesn't bring me anything. And that might sound selfish, but I want, this is my life, man. I want things that are going to enrich it. I don't want to be hanging around stuff that's going to give it a toxic stink. So that's why I'm reminding myself, time is valuable. Use it well. And on that note, I'm going to call time on this podcast. What a wonderful segue. Thank you, as always, to my beautiful 4 listeners for tuning in and spending your time with me today. As it's Friday, I'm going to wish you a fabulous weekend. Do things that are going to be worthy of your time. Spend time with good people. Spend time on good things. Have an enriching human experience. And don't waste it. Time is not confetti that we can just cast onto the winds of the cosmos. It is the most valuable thing that we own. Much love, everybody, and I'll catch you soon.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope that you found it useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writings or work around psychology and philosophy and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.substack.com. And that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll see you soon.